Hello and welcome to Baiju's Exam Prep IAS. A very warm good morning to everyone. I hope all of you are doing good. I welcome you all to class number 5 of governance. We'll wait for a couple of minutes. Let everyone join the class and then we'll begin. Thank you so much. Hi everyone once again. Good morning and I hope all of you are doing good. This is class number 5 of governance. Today is the 10th day of the prelims examination. So 10 days ago we had the prelims exam. What it means is that the prelims result is not very far away. It will come in just a few days, so be prepared for that and make sure that whatever you decide after prelims result, decide it very quickly so that you are not wasting any time whatsoever. So far we have had 4 classes of governance. In the 4 classes of governance, we have talked about transparency, where we talked about RTI first. Then we first talked about the Citizens Charter. Then we had talked about CAG, which is the Comptroller and the Auditor General of India. After that, we had a discussion on different types of laws and different types of agencies that we have in India. For example, we had discussed about the Lokpal, how does the Lokpal work, the Prevention of Corruption Act of 1988, what are some of the loopholes in the law. Then yesterday we discussed about the bodies such as the CBI, Central Bureau of Investigation, ED, that is the Enforcement Directorate. We also had a discussion about the CVC, Central Surveillance Commission, and the Whistleblower Protection Act. These are some of the things that we have discussed so far. Now we are moving on to class number 5. Today's class will mainly focus on the idea of governance and the idea of e-governance. Whatever we are studying in today's class, these two topics, that is governance and e-governance, are specifically for the mains examination. The topics that we studied till today, some of them could be asked in prelims exam also in some areas or in some cases, but the topics that we are going to study today are specifically only and only for the mains examination. I've told this to you earlier as well, and I'll tell this once again. In governance, your answers will only be considered as good and scoring if you give real examples. In governance answer, it's extremely important to give examples of what is happening around us. For example, if there's a question on e-governance, you have to give example of government initiatives by which the government is using technology to help the people. If you are asked about a certain government initiative, you have to give those examples. Without giving real examples of what is happening around us, it would be very difficult for you to get a good score in governance. And that is why for governance, you do not need to buy any specific book. And I've said this time and time again, I'll repeat this. You do not need to buy any specific book for governance. Rather, for governance, it is even more important that you go and study newspapers, you go and study the current affairs magazines. On that note, let's come back to the idea of governance. Now, the entire name of the subject is governance. How do you define governance? In simple terms, the process of decision making of the government. Whichever government is in power, in order to run the country, they have to take certain decisions. Now, how are the decisions made? How do they impact our lives? That is called as governance. Let's take a simple example. Every government, especially governments in middle income or developing countries such as India, governments understand that there are always limited resources. Like India does not have unlimited resources. Government's tax collection in India is not very high. So the government has to make a decision where to spend that money. The limited amount of money that the government is getting, do they spend that on building of roads, highways, bridges, schools, hospitals? Do they spend that in just giving free food or free electricity to the people? Do they spend that by, let's say, making free poll promises? Do they spend that by building statues or not? All these are important decisions that the people in power have to take. That decision making process followed by people in power who are sitting in important positions, this is called as governance. There are various things that are to be kept in mind while taking any decision. That decision making has to be in the interest of the people, and that is how governance usually works. Now, the idea of good governance is to ensure that we have effective and efficient decision making. They are implemented to ensure that citizens are the topmost priority. Now, these kind of one line definitions are important for you to understand because there are certain words that you understand yourself, but they are difficult to explain on paper. For example, if I ask you what is good governance, inside everyone will know what is good governance, but to define that on paper, write a 1 or 2 line definition is not that easy. That is why it's important that you should know what is good governance and how to write that on paper in one line. That is the idea of decision making, by keeping the interest of the citizens at the top of your mind, by making sure that the idea that the people should come first should always be in your mind. Now, in India, we also observe the Good Governance Day. Good Governance Day is observed on the 25th of December. 25th of December is the birth anniversary of our ex Prime Minister and Bharat Ratna awardee, Sri Atal Bihari Vajpayee. So, do remember, Atal Bihari Vajpayee's birthday, that is the 25th of December, is regarded as Good Governance Day in India. This was started by the Modi government only, so it's not a very old initiative. It was started very recently, just a few years back. Do remember this part as well. Now comes the important part. When you say there is good governance in the country, what do you mean? There are certain characteristics of good government. Every good government in their decision making follows these things. They are participatory in nature, they are consensus oriented, they are accountable, they are transparent, responsive, effective, equitable, and rule of law. That's to be followed. Now, we will discuss all of these one by one. I'll try and give examples of these as well so that you can understand what we are trying to talk about. Let's first start with participatory. Participatory government means that you should have participation from all the sections of the society. I'll give you an example. If you don't remember ministers of this government, because ministers are newly appointed, let's assume you don't remember. Let's talk about the last government. Before the election, when the government was formed, tell me very honestly, without googling, can you tell me the name of women ministers in India apart from Smriti Irani and Nirmala Sitaraman? Apart from Smriti Irani and Nirmala Sitaraman, can you tell me name of any women ministers in the last government? What do you think? Don't Google. Don't Google it. Mayawati, how? Mamta Banerjee was not a minister, guys. Anurag Hema Malini was a member of parliament, not a minister. Mahua Moitra was not a minister. Mahua Moitra is from the opposition. Sushma Swaraj is no more. Getting very weird examples from out from many people. Yes, Anupriya Patel, yes. Kangna Ranawat is member of parliament in this government, not the last one. Harish Rakhi Birla is from Delhi Legislative Assembly, not the central government. Someone is saying Draupadi Murmu. Guys, you should stop now. I think it's getting too much now. You should stop. Please don't say Draupadi Murmu. Draupadi Murmu is the president of India and not the minister. Okay, guys, you can stop now. As you can see here, either you don't know and you are making very dangerous guesses, or you would have to Google. So anyway, the idea is when you say the government has to be participatory, what it means to say is that you should have participation from different sections of the society while running the government. Okay, let me ask you one more question. Let me ask you one more question. Can you tell me name of any minister who is suffering from any disability? PWD as you call it, persons with disability. Do you have or do you remember any minister or anyone appointed as a minister who is from PWD category? What do you think? People are googling like anything, huh? Don't Google, guys. Rajneesh, how was Manmohan Singh suffering from disability, guys? Okay. I hope you understand what do you mean by people with disability because you are giving me example like Amit Shah, Nitish Kumar. What kind of disability are they suffering from? Pranam Mukherjee, guys, shh. You can stop now. You can stop now. Jagdish, Jagdish is saying disability to grow here. Okay, guys, I don't think that you are able to understand what is meant by people with disability, so you can stop. Basically, the idea, guys, I really hope that you are kidding and you are not going to give these examples in the real exam. If you give these examples in the real exam, it would really lead you to a lot of trouble. Anyways, let's come back. So the government needs to be participatory means the government needs to have participation from different sections of the society. An ideal government, I'm not saying that they would have participation in equal measures, but at least you have to have representation from different sections of the society to make sure that your decision making is focusing on different groups, that your decision making understands the problems and issues faced by the different groups. So government has to be participatory in that sense, and it has to be diverse all in terms of gender, in terms of religion, in terms of caste, in terms of people suffering from any kind of issues, because only when people from that particular background are taking the decisions, they would best know what problems they are facing. They would best know what kind of issues they are. For example, there is such a wide discussion that every country should have women reservation in parliament. Now, a law was passed in India as well about women reservation in parliament. The women reservation in parliament thing is something that is demanded all around the world because it's assumed again, that if we have more women in the parliament, the decision making would be better. If we have more women in the parliament, more women centric laws will be passed, more women rights will be focused on. What the women issues are, the government can focus much more on that. That is the idea. That is what you mean by participatory government. So government should be participatory. Second, the government should be consensus oriented. Now, what do you mean by consensus oriented? See, in a democracy, the idea is that the majority wins. So whatever the majority decides is considered as right in a democracy. But democracy or majority wins does not mean that you should not even listen to the other side. Just because you have the majority does not mean that you should not even listen to the other side. Means from the government, it is a government responsibility to ensure that there is participation and there is consensus. Consensus means making sure that everyone agrees to it. For example, in the past few years, we have seen the government of India introducing a lot of laws and bills, etc. Without any discussion, they are passed in the parliament. Now, this is not illegal. The government at the end of the day has the majority in the parliament. When you have the majority in the parliament, you can pass whatever laws that you want. But the idea is that the government should try to be consensus oriented. The government should try to first form a consensus. The government should first try to make sure that if possible the opposition also should agree to this, rather than just using the brute force of majority. It's always advisable that you should at least try and have consensus. If it is not possible, see, holding a consensus or building a consensus is not always possible. When the consensus is not possible, then obviously the majority will win. No one is saying that the majority should lose just because consensus is not being built. But at least an attempt needs to be made to first build a consensus. And when I say build a consensus, what we mean to say is that we should try and ensure that all the parties come on the same page, all the stakeholders agree to this, rather than only the majority going ahead and using their brute force. That is called consensus oriented. Now, it's easy to say this because whoever is in the majority behaves in the same manner. But the idea is a good idea, a good suggestion can come in from anywhere. I'll give you an example. In Indian polity, all of you would have read about something called the private bills. Have you read about private bills in Indian polity? What are private bills? What are private bills exactly? Fatima, every bill is introduced by a member only, no? Yes. Okay. So simple idea is bills introduced by non-ministers. So members of the parliament who are not ministers, when they introduce a bill, that is called a private bill. So usually in most cases, private bills are the ones that are introduced by the opposition mainly. Because when the government has to introduce a bill, it is the ministers only that will introduce the bill. From the side of the government, the ministers only introduce a bill in most cases. So when we say private member bill or a bill introduced by a non-minister, in most cases, what you mean to say is the bill introduced by the opposition. Now tell me this: has private member bill ever been passed in India? Is it possible, or have the private member bills ever passed in India? What do you think? Yes, we have had in the history of India 14 private member bills that have passed. There are 14 private member bills that have passed. Only 14. But only 14 of these bills have passed. But the interesting part is none of the private member bills have passed in the past 25 to 30 years. In the past 25 to 30 years, none of the private member bills have been passed. Now, what does it mean? What it means is that no government wants to make any law that was introduced by the opposition. In the last Lok Sabha, also, the Lok Sabha that just concluded, in the last Lok Sabha, also, members such as Shashi Tharoor from the Congress introduced multiple bills. They spent time in building the bill, in making the bill, introducing it, knowing very well that the bill will not be passed, and it did not pass. It was rejected by the government from the first day itself. Now, the problem here is you cannot assume that just because you are in power, only you will have a good idea. A good idea can come in from anywhere. How is it possible that the people in power are on the only ones who can think of a good idea? A good idea about a law, a good idea about a policy can come in from anywhere. And that is why it is important for the government to be consensus oriented. Again, if consensus does not work, you always have the majority force. You can always show, you can always make sure that you are able to pass whatever bill that you want. But the first attempt should be made to build a consensus. Third, the government should be accountable. We have discussed about accountability earlier as well. Accountability means answerable. In other words, if a government's policy does not achieve the entire goal or does not achieve the goal that was set, then the government should explain why did it not happen. For example, in the history of India, every government since our first government till today, every government in the history of India, while taking over the government, every political party says we will remove poverty. Every political party says the same thing. We will remove poverty, we will increase farmers' income. After so many years, close to 8 decades of our independence, if we still have poverty, if poverty has still not gone away, that means that some governments did not do their job properly, right? Because if every government in the history of India has always promised that we will remove poverty, and even then we are in a situation where we still have poverty close to 80 years after independence, that means some government or all governments, whatever be the case, all governments or some governments have not done their duty properly, right? But no government in the history of India, no government at all has ever come out and said, sorry, we were not able to achieve our goal. Never, ever, ever would you see any government or any minister coming out in the open and saying, sorry, our policy failed. Sorry, we are not able to achieve our goal. No answerability, no accountability is ever seen in the government. Accountability means holding yourself accountable, holding yourself answerable for your actions. Why do the governments not accept their mistake? Why do the governments never say, oh, something wrong happened? I'll give you let's take a very recent example. We saw these paper leaks, the NEET paper leak, and then the UGC NET being cancelled, and the UGC NET PG being cancelled, all these exams being cancelled. Do you think anyone from the government will come out in the open and say to the students, we are very sorry, we wasted your entire year, we are very sorry you had to go to all this trouble, we will make sure it does not happen again? Would you even imagine someone from the government coming out? No, they will not do that. And it is true with every government. I'm not saying the present government, no one will ever do that. First, they will not even accept something wrong has happened. Then if they do accept something wrong has happened, they'll say, oh, we are not responsible, someone else is responsible. That is that has been a problem in the history of India. There have been so many blunders. Take an example of emergency. When emergency was imposed, would you ever imagine the government coming out in the open, Indira Gandhi government or Congress party later on, coming out in the open and saying, sorry, what we did was wrong? No, no one ever says that, because it is assumed that when you accept your mistake, you are a weak person. It's assumed that if you accept that what I did was wrong, the people will not trust you. You saw so many people, for example, dying during the COVID-19 crisis. Everyone here would know someone who has died from COVID-19, either in your immediate family or in your relatives. Everyone, every single one of you would know someone who died from COVID. But did you see anyone from the government coming out in the open and said, sorry, we were not able to save your life, we are very sorry, we were not able to provide you oxygen, we were not able to provide you hospital? No, no one will come out and say this. Everyone knew that there was lack of oxygen. Everyone knew that there was lack of hospital beds. I am not saying the government could have done something. It was a first time ever, no one knew what to do. But there are countries where the governments have come out in the open and said sorry to its people. There have been many countries where governments have said sorry. In our country, you would never imagine the government or any minister also coming out and saying sorry, we did not really mean to do this, sorry. So the government should be accountable for its actions, but that is not true in reality. The government should be transparent. We have discussed this transparency thing in detail. Transparency means the government actions should be open. Everyone should know how a government decision is taken, where the government money is being spent. For example, let's say RTI, which we discussed in detail. The government actions, the government spending, the government earning, all of that should be open in the public. All the people should know how the government is working, how the government's expenses are being calculated. The government should also be responsive. Responsive means responding to the demands of people. Now, responding to the demands of people can be seen in different ways. For example, you just saw a few months back the government of India had introduced these farm bills. The three new farm bills were introduced. After such a huge protest, the government finally took back the farm bills. Now, there are two ways to look at it. One way to look at it was that the government was responsive to the demands of the people, that the government responded. The people said that we don't want the bills, people said that we don't like the bills, and the government responded by taking it back. That was an example of a responsive government. On the other hand, you might also say that the government was blackmailed into it, the government should not have taken it back. But the idea is, whenever a big section of the population demands something, the government should at least pay attention to it. Not saying that the government should always accept the demands, but the government should at least ensure that that section of the population is being heard. I'll give you an example. Do you know what happened just yesterday in Kenya? Were you reading the news? What happened in Kenya just yesterday? Did you read the news? Okay, so those who don't know what happened was the Kenya government introduced some new taxes and increased the existing taxes on the people. So, for example, if they had to pay 15% tax already, it was increased to 25%, 30% tax. Some new tax was introduced in Kenya. Because of those new taxes, obviously, people were very angry. People were not happy with what was happening. So, a big agitation was introduced. And this agitation, these people, hundreds and thousands of people, they attacked their own parliament. They attacked their own parliament. A section of the parliament, a part of the parliament was burnt down. Many people were killed also because the police and the forces retaliated to save these MPs, members of parliament, etc. So situation became very bad in Kenya. Now, it is an example of the government not being responsive. It's an example of the government not listening to or not giving a ear to the people's demands. Now, please understand this. What we are saying is not that the government should accept every demand made. No government can accept every demand that is made to the government, because that will set a very wrong example, that will set a wrong precedent. The people will now understand that in order to get your demands accepted, you just have to use violence. But if a specific demand is made, the least that should happen here is that you should at least, or the government should at least make sure that they are listening. They are trying to understand the other side. They are not just dismissing them. If you have political science as an optional subject, you might have heard of a person called J.S. Mill. Either in political science or in ethics, also, you might have read about J.S. Mill. So, J.S. Mill, John Stuart Mill, was a famous political thinker. He was very famous for giving his views about freedom of speech and expression. He very famously had said that the government has a responsibility to listen to everyone. He famously said that if out of 100 people, 99 people have one view and only one single person has some other view, even then that one single person has a right to be heard. That one single person should also be heard, they should also be listened to, and the government should look into that. So the government should be responsive. Next, an ideal government should be effective and efficient. Now, what do you mean by this? Do you or have you read about something called Gandhi's idea of trusteeship? Have you read about this? Mahatma Gandhi's idea of trusteeship. What exactly is this? Those who are saying yes, what exactly is this? Gandhi's idea of trusteeship? Yes, Sony. J.S. Mill acknowledged women's empowerment. What do you mean by trusteeship? Guys, don't Google. If you know, tell me. If you don't know, don't worry. No, Bhuvnesh, it's not about equal resources. It's not about wealth distribution, also, guys. No. Okay, let's try and understand this. When we were in school and college, do you remember in our school there used to be certain people, we used to call them trustees, that these are the trustees of the school. Now, who exactly is a trustee? Basically, trustee means someone who is not the owner, but they are just running the organization. Trustee means someone who is not the owner of this organization, but they are just running this organization for some time and then they will pass it on to someone else. Gandhi's idea of trusteeship meant that whoever is in the government, Gandhiji said that whoever is in power, whoever is in the government, should not consider themselves as the owner of the government. Whoever is in power should understand that they are not here permanently. They are here only for a short period of time and they will then pass on the government to someone else. So, Mahatma Gandhi's idea was that if you are running the government, don't consider yourself as the owner, you are only a trustee. Means when you have the power, don't think that I will spend every single rupee that the government has. And that is a tendency that every politician has. When politicians come to power, they think that the money of the government is their personal wealth and they start spending money in whatever way that they want. They do everything with the money, whatever they want, without any restrictions. It is all legal. It's not illegal. You are in the power. You can pass the money bill. You can spend the money in whatever way that you want. But that should not be the case. The government has to be effective and efficient. If a certain work of the government can be done for 100 rupees, you should not spend 500 rupees for that just because you can. You can spend a lot more money, but if you are in the government, you are not the owner of that money. You are not someone who will take this with your personal will. As someone who's running the government, it is your responsibility to be as efficient in running of the government as possible, as effective as running of the government as possible. If a job can be done for 500 crore rupees, you should not be spending more than that on that job. If the government can cut down on certain expenditure, they should. It is not that the government or someone who's running the government, it is their personal wealth. It is the wealth of the nation, it is the wealth of the government. So the idea is that a government should be effective and efficient. Next, government should be equitable and inclusive. Means the government should try to ensure that there is equitability in the society, meaning that the government should ensure that the fruits of development, for example, are spread for everyone. We have seen so many news stories of wealth inequality in India and all around the world to be true. Only a few handful of the people have most of the wealth in India. Few handful of the people have so much wealth that they control most of the resources of India, while a majority of other people do not have any money with them. That is again something that the government must look into. The government must ensure the fruits of development, the wealth, all these resources, all these are equitably divided. All these are divided in such a manner that everyone gets at least something in their own pocket. Last but one of the most important ones, there should be rule of law. In a lot of cases, when something wrong happens in a country, people get extremely angry and they don't want to follow the rule of law. Rule of law means whatever is a written law of the land that has to be followed. Doesn't matter what your emotions are. Doesn't matter how angry you become. I'll give you an example. You all would have heard about the Nirbhaya case. Have heard of it or not? Nirbhaya case of Delhi. You all would have heard the name at least, Nirbhaya case of Delhi, right? Okay. So in the Nirbhaya case of Delhi, a lady was gang raped by multiple people, and the lady eventually passed away. It was an extremely violent. It was a very brutal case. Now, in the case, the people who were involved, one of the persons who was involved in the case was 2 months below 18 years. One of the people involved in the case was 2 months below 18 years, only 2 months. Now, the law at that time was that if you are a juvenile, juvenile means anyone who is below 18 years of age. Anyone who is below 18 years of age, the law at that time was that whatever punishment or whatever crime that you do does not matter. Maximum punishment for you can only be 3 years. Maximum punishment was 3 years only. Does not matter what your crime is. Just does not matter. Now, in this case, while all the other people were given death penalty, this one teenager or this one person who was a juvenile was given only 3 years in jail. After spending 3 years in the juvenile justice home, the teenager was set free. He is now a free person, no one knows his identity. But the idea here is when this was happening, when this case was going on, there was a large scale protest across the country. People were demanding that this person who's a juvenile should also be given a death sentence. Now, it was obvious that the people were very angry. People said that the law should change. We should give death sentence to this guy also. Now, the government did change the law. The Juvenile Justice Act was amended. Today, for example, if there is a person who is between 16 and 18 years and the crime is very heinous, then they can be tried as an adult. They will be given more punishment than 3 years. But at that point of time, that law did not work, or at that point of time, even when the law was passed, the law could not come into effect from a retrospective date. The law had to come into effect after the law was passed. So, despite all this protest, despite the demands of the people, you cannot go ahead and give a death sentence to an individual. Why? Because in a civilized society, you follow the rule of your own law. If you don't like the law, then change the law. If you don't like law, then change the law. As simple as that. But you cannot have a situation where you randomly decide what is good, what is bad. I'll give you some more examples. A few years back, there was a very horrific case in Hyderabad. There was a lady doctor in Hyderabad whose apparently scooty was stopped by certain people, and she was raped and then she was burnt alive. Obviously, she died. These people were arrested by the police, and it became a big matter. The people demanded justice. People said that police should take some action. So what the police did was, after arresting them, the police encountered and police killed all of them. Rather than taking them to the court, rather than going ahead and let's say going ahead and going to the police station, or rather than taking the case to the court and then letting the court decide, in Hyderabad, the police killed all these people by themselves. The police said that they were running away. They gave multiple examples. Most of the people supported the police. When the police killed these people in an encounter, most of the people supported the police, saying that the police has done the right thing. And it has happened in other cases as well. For example, in Uttar Pradesh, in UP, there was this gangster Vikas Dubey who had killed many people, who had killed many policemen. He was running away. The police arrested him. The police were bringing him back, but before he could be brought back to the prison, in the way itself, the police killed him. And police again gave this example or gave this excuse that he was trying to run away, he was trying to escape. So we had to take action. So we had to do an encounter. We had to kill him. Now, in this case, also people appreciated the police. In this case, also people said that the police did the right thing. The judiciary would not have done anything to him. In both these cases, people really appreciated the police. But I'll give you one more example then. In Uttar Pradesh, a few years ago, there was a case of two Dalit girls who were kidnapped, then they were raped, and then they were killed by some people in the village. Now, these two girls and their dead bodies were not even given back to their families. What the police did was the police conducted the last rites, the rituals of the girls' bodies, and they did not give the bodies back to the family. Why? The police thought that by doing this, they will be able to control the situation. The police thought that if we give back the bodies, and the situation will come out, will go out of control. Now, the police, what they did was obviously not as per the law. As per the law, they should have given back the bodies to the family of the victims. But the question that I have here is, if you are supporting the police in the first two cases, if you say the police did the right thing in Hyderabad, if you say the police did the right thing by killing the gangsters, then you cannot take away, or you cannot criticize the police in the third case also. In the third case also, you then have to support the police, because in all these three cases, the police did something that was against the rule of law. You cannot have a law where you randomly decide by yourself what is good, what is bad. If you think that there are problems in the judiciary, if you think that there are problems in the justice system, then change the law. But you cannot have a situation where you are randomly deciding on a case to case basis what is good, what is bad, what punishment to be given, what punishment not to be given. In any civilized society, that is not how it works. In any civilized society, you have to first make sure that you are following the rule of law, whatever law that you have made in your country. And again, if you don't like the law, then change the law. Don't just randomly go against the law. If you don't like the law, then you have to change the law. Otherwise, you will have a situation which is called as Matsanyay. Have you heard of this word? Matsnyay. Have you heard of this word? Yes, no, anyone? Okay. Yes. Okay. Those who don't know, Matsnyay translates into law of the sea. Law of the sea. So basically, what it means is that in the sea, there is always a bigger fish to eat a smaller fish. So in the sea, if this is a fish, there'll always be a bigger fish behind the fish. Sorry, this is the only type of fish I know how to draw. Very bad at drawing, but this is the only fish I know how to draw. Smiling fish. Okay. Okay. Let's have a smaller fish for this also. So basically, the law Matsya means that for every small fish, there is a bigger fish at the back. Matsya means a situation where there is no law and order. Everyone is ready to eat someone else. We don't want such a situation in our society. When you go out of your home, and if you are wearing a gold chain, you should not be worried about whether someone will come randomly and take it away. No action should be taken. If you are going out of your home while wearing good clothes, or while having a mobile phone, or while wearing a chain or an ornament, you should be able to trust that in our society there is law and order. If you take away the rule of law, then we are living in the sea. We are not living in human life. That is why all these are important characteristics of good governance. Now, does our government follow this or not? I don't know. You be the judge. You decide. It's not. It's not possible that every government will follow all of these. All of these are continuous processes. These are not end goals. For example, you can't say my government is accountable, my government is transparent, because it's a thing that has to be practiced every single day. Every single day the government has to follow the rule of law. Every single day the government has to try to be consensus oriented. Every single day the government should try to ensure that it's more participatory, more responsive in nature. So every single day the government has to continue on this path rather than one single day only. That is usually how we see good governance being seen in the country. Now, related to governance, we have one important phrase that became very famous. Ever since Prime Minister Modi came to power, he has been using this phrase called minimum government, maximum governance. What do you mean by this? Ever since Prime Minister Modi took power, he said that we will try to reduce the size of the government. When you say reduce the size of the government, means reduce the number of steps to be taken to get a certain permission, reduce the number of steps to be taken to get a certain license, try and make it even more efficient. Minimum government, maximum governance means reducing the discretionary powers. Now, discretionary power basically means when you decide on your own. When you decide on your own means when there are no proper rules in place, when a certain official will decide on his or her own what to do, what not to do. For example, you go and ask for a license. Let's say you want to open up a medical store. Then you want to apply for a license. If the officer has been given the discretionary power to decide whether or not license is to be given or not, the more discretionary power they have, more are the chances of corruption. When you leave it on the officers to decide what to do, what not to do, and they have the power to decide, that means that there is more chances of corruption taking place. The government will also be trying to remove obsolete rules and regulations. It's a very common practice. It does not come in the news often, but every single year, a lot of old laws are deleted from our statute. Every single year in the parliament, the government passes a law to remove hundreds of old laws in the country. It's a very common practice. Old laws, old rules, and regulations are removed very, very regularly in the parliament. Appropriate accountability is set up. If an officer was responsible to do a job and they are not being able to do that properly, the officer has to answer, the officer has to explain why has it happened. There should be focus on goals rather than rules. For a long time, the bureaucracy in India, and we have discussed this earlier as well, for a long time, the bureaucracy in India has been focusing a lot on rules and regulations. Why? Because they want to play safe. I'll give you an example. Usually, you will see in India, we are a very conservative country in the sense that we don't adopt new technologies very quickly. In most of the cases, we first wait and see what is happening in other countries and then we will decide whether we want to accept it or not. I'll give you a few examples. Let's take an example of GM crops. You would have all read about the GM crops, genetically modified crops. Have you heard of this or not? If you have, tell me which GM crop is grown in India. Which GM crops are grown in India? What do you think? Okay, okay, okay. Uh, those who are okay, many people are saying cotton, mustard, brinjal. Okay, okay. Now listen to this. Listen to this carefully. Okay. In India, despite all these different types of news that you see, in India, even today, the only genetically modified crop that is grown in India is cotton. Only cotton is grown in India. About mustard, you all have read about this, but it has still not been given the permission to be grown on ground. So mustard that you have read about, that is the DMH11 variety of mustard developed by PUSA scientists, that has still not been allowed to grow physically. India still only has allowed cotton. GM cotton is the only crop that has been allowed now. Even brinjal has not been allowed. So basically in India, remember this, in India so far, no genetically modified crop that you can eat is allowed so far. Cotton is allowed because you don't eat cotton unless you are, I don't know, unless you are different, you don't eat cotton. Anything that is edible, anything that is eaten, brinjal, mustard, we have not allowed that so far. Why? Because there's such a long delay. Permissions are given, then permissions are taken back. Mustard, for example, was given the go ahead earlier, then the government took the step back, then the Supreme Court also intervened. Why? Because what happens in India is that we are extremely careful, and we are, I would say, too vigilant on the rules. We first wait for many years to see what is happening in other countries, to see what is the result, and only then we will accept it. We don't take a lot of chances, we follow the rules, for example. And if you want to look at an example of a country that is accepting the GM crop, for example, very quickly, look at our neighborhood, look at Bangladesh. Bangladesh, for example, has been growing GM, genetically modified rice, in very large quantities. Bangladesh has been growing what you call as a golden rice. Bangladesh has given approval to genetically modified crops in multiple areas. Bangladesh has accepted it, and they have actually been taking benefit of all this technology. In India, we usually don't do this. In India, we focus too much on the rules rather than taking a chance. I'll give you one more example. When COVID-19 crisis was happening and the vaccines were rolled out, if you remember, when the vaccines were first rolled out, it was not for children. It was first for those people who are above 18 years of age. Then the government said, okay, even those who are above 12 can take the vaccine. But the important decision to be taken was, should the vaccine be given to children as well or not? Scientists around the world conducted a study and they said, okay, we can give it to children also. Many countries started doing this, but India did not. We waited for a very long time. We wanted to see what is the result, and only then we could take action. So in India, bureaucracy has always been focused a lot on rules, following the rules in place, because they think that if they don't follow the rules, if something wrong happens and they're not following the rules, they will be the one who will be blamed. So bureaucracy in India has always been focusing a lot more on rules than on the goals that have to be achieved. Bureaucracy rather has to be an effective facilitator. So, for example, if you want to open up a big business, if you want to open up a big business today, the officers in the government office will tell you, no, you can't do this. You require this permission, that permission. You don't have this, you don't have that. Right now, in most cases, bureaucracy discourages you from doing anything big. The bureaucracy says, no, you can't do this, you can't do that. However, on the other hand, ideally the bureaucracy should be a facilitator. The bureaucracy should encourage you to go ahead and implement these ideas. That is the entire idea of minimum government, maximum governance that the Prime Minister had promised. Has it happened? Not really. A lot of these are mostly slogans. Has it happened? Not really. We do not see a major change in the government. The government, when it was first announced, when in 2014 this new government came to power, they said that we will reduce the size of the government. When you say reduce the size of the government, what do you mean is that you try and bring down the number of ministers, you try and bring down the number of bureaucrats, but that has not happened. And now that we have a coalition government, it will not happen, because in a coalition government, you anyways have to appoint a lot more ministers. So this has remained more of a slogan even today, rather than actually being implemented on the ground. Now, a big part of governance, from where regular questions are asked, is e-governance. E-governance, as the name suggests, means E basically stands for electronic. In simple terms, the use of technology such as information technology in governance, in ruling of the country, is called as e-governance. There are very regular questions asked on e-governance. Every second, third year, you will see a question on e-governance. Very simple, straightforward questions. The idea is here that the government should be open to using technology. The government should be open to using new tools to reach out to the people. And this has happened. We have seen how in the last few years, governance has been using a lot more technology to reach out to the people. For example, and I'll give you multiple examples here. There is My GOV app, there is DigiLocker, there is, for example, DigiSeva. All these are examples of the government actually coming up and using and making sure that we have, sorry, and then we have, for example, Digi Yatra also. The government has been using all these apps, all these technologies to reach out to the people, to make sure that your life becomes better. We have discussed earlier as well how a lot of platforms have allowed the people to file complaints online. We discussed about RTI, how RTI can be filed online. We discussed about the Lokpal, how complaints to the Lokpal can be filed online. We saw about the CVC, how the complaints to the CVC can be filed online. All these are examples, and there are multiple other examples of how e-governance usually works. The starting of this idea of use of technology is very, very old. It was started in 1970 when we first set up the Department of Electronics. After that, there was NIC, National Informatics Center. It was established in 1977. You would have noticed how a lot of government websites have the domain name .nic. Have you seen that? Many of the government websites have .nic name attached to it. Have you seen that? Have you noticed it or not? Some of them have been replaced by .gov now, but a lot of government websites earlier and even today, many government websites used to have .nic name. NIC is National Informatics Center. This is the government department that is responsible for maintaining all the government websites. It is a government department that is responsible for making sure that all these online infrastructure actually remain safe. In 1987, the government started something called the NIC net, that is NIC network, for National Satellite Based Computer Network. Now, what exactly is this? When, for example, our Prime Minister has an online meeting with Joe Biden, when our Prime Minister participates in online summits, let's say the SCO summit, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, had this summit online. So when our Prime Minister participates in that online through any of the any of the apps, do you think our Prime Minister uses Geo or Airtel or BSNL? Do you think our Prime Minister would use these kind of networks? Imagine our Prime Minister talking to Vladimir Putin, and then all of a sudden he says, "Hi, I can't hear you. Your voice is breaking." And then our Prime Minister says, "Oh, don't worry. Switch on and off. Switch off your modem and then try to switch it on again. It will work." That is how my Geo works. Do you think that will happen? Obviously not. They can't rely on these private networks, Geo, Airtel, BSNL, or whatever, to give them the coverage that they require. But these are not secure. The government has their own network. That government's own network is called NIC net. It has to be much more secure, it has to be faster. So for the government, there is a separate network built by the government called NIC net. It's a satellite based computer network. That is how the governments communicate with each other. That is the network the government uses. It is long distance, high speed leased data circuits. It is connected to state capitals as well. That is how the governments use it. They are not using our data pack of 1 GB recharge or 2 GB recharges. They have their own network that is safe, that is given to them. Again, that's a part of the government trying to trust technology, trying to use technology to make the governance better. Now, e-governance has a lot of advantages. Using of this technology, using of these apps, etc., has a lot of advantages over the other process. I'll give you very simple examples. You can ask your parents, and it is not a very old thing. I, as a kid, have also done this. Ask your parents when they had to pay electricity bill. You had to go to the electricity board, you had to go to that electricity board office, stand in the line, wait for your number to come, and then you have to pay the fee. And the interesting part was, electricity office will be closed on Sunday. So if your father is a working professional or your mother is a working professional, they would specially have to take half day off just to go and pay the electricity bill. And it was not an easy thing. You had to go there in time, stand in the queue, make sure that your time comes in, and then they will be dispute on the bill. You have to show them the old bills and receipt. You have to save all your receipts, etc. Remember, every single house, even today, I can 100% guarantee, even today, every single household has that transparent pouch of file, and in that transparent pouch you have those old receipts of electricity bill payment, LIC payment, your parents bank passbook. Everyone has that transparent box pouch, right? Every 3 4 months your parents will take out that pouch and they will then start to go through the stuff, and they will then keep everything back in it and then keep it in the almirah. Remember? So all of this is something that is the thing of the past. Now what happens? Now it's very rare for someone to go all the way to electricity office just to pay the bill. Now every single thing is done online. You have multiple apps, you can do it at any point of time. At 2 a.m. in the night, when you're scrolling Instagram reels because you can't sleep, you can pay electricity bill at 2 a.m. in the night. You don't have to go in the office hours. Earlier, you had to be there in the office hours in the electricity department just to pay your bill. So the life has changed drastically. And it's just in the past few years that life has changed so much. It is all because of the use of technology. All these bill payments, etc., have become much, much, much easier. All these bill payments, interacting with the government, taking advantage of government, a lot of things can be done online. I'll give you one more example. When you want to get a driving license made, the first step is you first get a learning license. Learner's license, where you take the license, then you start learning. Earlier, for learner license also, you had to visit the RTO and you had to make sure that you fill in all the paperwork. Now, a learning driving license can be made just through a website. You don't have to go anywhere, because for learning license, you don't have to show that you already know driving, because it is a license given for those who want to learn driving. So it can be done at home only. Now, a lot of these things have been converted to online, which is a big advantage of e-governance. First, it reduces it reduces the time taking for processing of the file or movement of the file. We see a lot of movies and we see a lot of stories also, where you see government offices talking like the file has to be transferred, this file will go here, this file will go there. And that is all a reality in the government offices. File transferring from one table to the second table to the third table is a harsh reality. In online world, that does not happen. You don't have to have backup for data loss. For example, in the past, I would say more than 10 years now, I have paid all my bills online, be electricity bill, other bills also. I've all paid. We have all mostly paid them online. Now, when you pay these bills online, you don't have to save your receipt. All of that is done online on the app. All of that is stored there. So you don't have to basically share a receipt. You are not fearful that your data will be lost. There is much lesser paperwork involved here. Manpower, space required is much lower, and then there's cost cutting as well. Now, understand the idea of cost cutting. If you don't have to travel to pay a bill, you can sit at home, save your time, save your cost, save your transportation. From the side of the government also, they don't need now any officer who will sit on that window to take payment from the people. That is working from both the side. That is cost cutting. But please understand, whenever you first use a new technology, in the first few years, the cost will increase. Please understand this. In the first few years, the cost will increase. It is only after a few years that the cost will start to come down. Why? The reason being, the reason being, when you deploy new technology, you have to spend money in building that technology. You have to spend much more money. Second, you have to pay money to people to maintain that. For example, all these new technologies, all these apps that are being built, you need people to manage that. You need people to handle that. So all of that will increase the cost initially. But it is only in the long run that the cost then starts to come down. That is how the cost cutting is seen. Initially, in the first few years, it all is going upwards in terms of cost, is a high investment cost. But in the long run, it all starts to come down when people don't have to travel, when the government doesn't have to employ an officer, especially just to collect the bills. Other advantages include anywhere, anytime government, as I've discussed. Pay your bills anywhere, anytime. Apply for government services anywhere, anytime. You don't have to be within office hours. You don't have to be on weekdays itself. You can do it at any point of time. There is much more transparency. See, the lesser human to human interaction that will be, the more transparency and the more or the better the services will be. One of the problems in government services earlier, or even today, one of the problems of corruption government service is corruption only happens when you're dealing with people. At least till today, we don't have machines that ask for a bribe. Now you don't know, tomorrow with AI becoming smarter, even robots and machines might start asking you for a bribe. But at least till today, machines don't ask you for a bribe. It's only when you have human to human interaction that there is corruption, that there is bribery involved. So when you have more technology coming in, when you have more interaction with the technology, you reduce the chance of corruption, you improve your service delivery, it reduces transaction cost because again you don't have to travel anywhere, you don't have to interact, and it can facilitate greater democratic engagement. What do you mean by this? Basically, in most of our households, in most of our households, when you had to go and pay a bill, let's say electricity bill, water bill, whatever, it is considered as a responsibility of males in the family, right? That you go and pay the bill. You very rarely you will see a woman in the family, unless she's living alone or there is no male in the family. Very rarely would you see a woman in the family go and stand in that line to pay the bill, right? You would have all seen that. Somehow, all these things of going outside, interacting with the officer, of going outside and buying something, it was all naturally assumed that this is something that the males in the family will do. But now that it has all happened online, it has allowed women also and people from all different age groups to now have that facility. Older people, elderly who could not go out now, all of them can actually do this online. And you can take one more example. The example of railway tickets, railway bookings. You had to go to the railway station, that railway booking office, ticket booking office, fill up that form, stand in the line, and then by the time that your number comes, you reach the window, maybe all the seats are booked anyways. Now it is all online. Now you don't have to worry about that. When you're online, you can book the tickets whenever you want. So it has allowed more people to avail the government services. It has taken away that difference of gender, that difference of age, etc. When some people could not go out, all of them have now been given this equal opportunity. All of these are advantages of using technology. Having said that, there is a problem in this e-governance that still exists. For example, first, there is still a digital divide and lack of digital trust. What do you mean by this? Digital divide means even today, you have a situation where urban versus rural divide can be seen. Even today, in rural areas, the network coverage and the use of that technology is not as high as it is in the urban areas. There is a big digital divide, and not just rural urban, it is also a gender based divide. What do you mean by this? Let me try and explain this to you. Now, let's take a simple example. Let's say that in your family, let's say in your family there is your father, your mother, and there are some other members in the family, you and your sister or brother. Let's assume your family has one mobile phone. Okay, let's assume that your family has one mobile phone. Now tell me, what are the chances that this mobile phone will be with your father or with your mother? What do you think? In usual cases, if your family has only one mobile phone, what do you think? Who will keep this mobile phone, father or mother? What do you think? In most cases, father, right? As you are saying in the chat, in most cases, father only, right? Now, this again tells you the digital divide. This is again, see the interesting part. We did not even say that the mother is working or not. We did not even say that the father is working or not. We just asked a simple question that between mother and father, who is more expected to have that mobile phone, and the answer in 90% cases is the father. So again, there's a digital divide on basis of gender as well. You do not see women having that much access openly to this technology as compared to males. And I'll give you a real example of this as well here. uh, just like we have many cyclones and floods in India, in Bangladesh also, there are many cyclones that hit. Many of the cyclones that hit India, they hit Bangladesh as well. About 20 years back, there was an important study that was conducted in Bangladesh. The study found out in Bangladesh that whenever there are cyclones, whenever there are these kind of natural disasters, many more women are killed as compared to men. Okay, listen to this carefully. When this analysis was done, it was found out in Bangladesh that whenever there is a natural disaster, many more women are killed as compared to men. Now, everyone was surprised at why is this happening? Why is it that women are killed in much larger numbers as compared to men? What is happening? And a proper study was done. And see what the study found out. It's so interesting. The study found out that, let's assume there is a flood, there is a cyclone that is coming in. Now, cyclones can be predicted. In India, also, the government can predict the cyclones. Now, the technology has become so much better that you can predict a cyclone before it hits in the next few days. So, you have multiple days in your hand and you can warn the people. Earlier, when you could detect a cyclone, you could only detect a few hours earlier, not many days. Now you can detect many days earlier as well. So in Bangladesh, what actually used to happen was the government used to know that cyclone is coming in a few hours. The government used to send messages on the mobile phone. like warning messages that the cyclone will hit in this much time, you should vacate now. Now, what happened is in these coastal areas, most of the coastal areas where the cyclone used to hit are poor coastal areas. These families had only one mobile phone. As I asked you, most of the mobile phones were with the father, the male in the family, and they were out on work. Most of them had gone out for work in other cities. Most of them had gone out to other areas to work. So even if they did receive a warning message on their phone, there was no way in which they could communicate the same message to the ladies at the home. And since the ladies in the home did not get that message, they were the ones who suffered the most damage in that cyclone. This was an entire study conducted in Bangladesh. Now, see how the digital divide works. The digital divide can actually cost you your life. And that is why, even when you say digital India and the technology has come up, all these things, the point is it has not impacted everyone equally. Some sections of the population have done better, they have more access to technology, and some do not. And it's not just rural versus urban, it's gender based as well. Then there's lack of digital trust as well. Means you still see a lot of people who are not comfortable with making payments online. There are so many people, even today, who, if they order something online, they will always do cash on delivery only because they don't trust giving money online, they don't trust putting their card details online. There is still a lack of trust in the people about using technology. And it is not just with uneducated people, many educated people also in a slightly higher age group. They don't trust technology that much, especially by with making payments, especially with making giving your details, etc. And that also the big challenge. Another challenge is proper work plan development is missing. Now, what do you mean by work plan? Any idea what is work plan? Any idea? It is not very complex. So, work plan basically, as the name says, the entire plan of how the infrastructure will work. Now, in India, basically, even the apps that you see, the government apps and the government initiatives that are using this technology, you do not see any proper work plan development, as in, you do not see how the government will be making sure that these apps become better over time. For example, we have the MyGov app. Now, how many of you have used MyGov app? I don't know. Have you used this MyGov app or website? Some of you would have used it. If you have not used it, you can download it from the Play Store, or you can just see the website. So basically, what this app is, it's a way for the government to interact with the people. The government, for example, uploads a lot of things here. Many competitions are held here. Essay writing competition, etc., are held here. The government publishes draft bills here. You can read the bills. You can give feedback to the government also here. There are polls and quizzes that are held in this app. It's an interesting app. You can watch it. You can see it. You can see the in the website as well. It's interesting. Now the problem is the potential of this app is much more. It could have been used for many other things as well. For example, things such as online voting, but we have not gone there. Most of the apps that the government is still using or the government is asking the people to use are just for giving information, and they are not looking at achieving a much larger goal. For example, on one hand, we do see that new technology is coming up and our lives are becoming better. But even today, for a lot of things, we still need to visit a government office. For example, let's say passport. For making of a passport, you can take the appointment online, but you still have to visit. You can't be sitting at home and expect that the passport itself will come and you don't have to go. You still have to go. So there is still a lot of improvement that needs to be done in these government apps. The work plan development, the ease of use has to become better. A lot of these apps are not that easy to use. Some of these start hanging if you use it for a long time. Similarly, the vision of the government is not very broad. As I said, important things such as voting, etc., have not even been discussed. In India, the voting percentage has never been very high. Our usual voting percentage in the election is 65% to 70%. Usually between 65 and 70 is the usual voting percentage that we see in India. Now, in order to increase voting, in order to encourage more and more people to vote, the suggestion is, why not make it an online exercise? Make it easier for the people to vote. How? By using these apps, etc., asking the people to vote. But the government has not worked in that direction. The government has not thought about how to make all these apps even more useful by adopting this technology. All these things are still lacking. The government of India is still using these apps just to give more information rather than making a big change. Then government re-engineering is not that great. See, a lot of government websites, if I just open up a website in front of you and I ask you, is it a private website or is it a government website? Most of you will be able to identify whether it is a government website or not. The design of the government website is different as compared to private websites. The design of private websites is much, much better. Government websites keep on hanging. There are no pop-ups. You will not see information being given properly. So the government websites do not really live up to the expectations. The government websites are not at that level where the private websites are. The apps also, there is still a lot of detail that needs to be included there. You see a lot of news stories about data being stolen, our Aadhaar data being stolen, government data being hacked, etc. All of that means that there are still challenges in digital India. There are still challenges in e-governance that have not been resolved by the government. Then some other challenges also remain. For example, cost. Not everyone can afford an internet. Not everyone can afford a smartphone or computer or laptops, etc., to take advantage of the government services. There are also issues of privacy. As more and more people start using online services, issues of data theft remain, issues of your privacy being hindered, or issues of hacking, etc., are still a reality. Even the government websites are hacked, so our private individuals or our private websites or private devices can also be hacked. Then there's also again an issue of language. If you go to a government website, most websites by default will open up in English. In some websites, in the central government website specifically, you might see an option to translate into Hindi, but you do not see other options to translate into any other language. So, if you want to use the government website or app or services and you only know a local regional language, it will be very difficult for you to use it. There is lack of content in the vernacular or the local language. The government websites do not allow you translation into a lot of languages. The state government websites might have an option to allow you to visit websites in their own state language, their regional language. But if you talk about the central government websites, most of them are either in Hindi or in English and not in other languages. That remains a problem. Apart from that, Abhishek is saying Google Translate. Abhishek, how will Google Translate work in an app? If a poor middle class man is looking at a government app, opens up a government app, do you expect now he will translate everything in Google, copy paste everything, and then see that? If you are so knowledgeable that you know how to use Google Translate, then you don't need Google Translate. Trust me. People who need Google Translate don't know how to use Google Translate. People who use Google Translate don't really need that. That is the irony, actually. Now, these are some of the issues that have still remained. Then there's also obviously lack of awareness. The other issues of digital divide, gender based divide that we discussed, lack of awareness about what can be done online, what cannot be done online still remain. All these are issues because of which e governance has not been 100% accepted all around the country. Apart from this, guys, those who are suggesting me English is required to search for Google Translate, again, the idea, yes, Jagdish, as you're saying correctly, see, all these tools that you are suggesting, Google Translate, this and that, think of it from a point of view of a common man. Let's assume this. You all have your grandparents, or some of you might not have grandparents, but assume this, your grandparent is looking at his or her phone. Do you think if he or she does not understand this, whatever is written, do you think he or she will now go to Google Translate, translate that, and then try and see what to do with the app? Just imagine them. And then you will be able to tell the answer whether Google Translate or anything like that will be useful for them. You are thinking from your point of view, but your point of view does not really apply to a large section of the population, because a large section of the population is not in your age group, they're not at your education level, so that is very very different, and that these are some of the issues that still remain. Apart from that, as I told you, most of Indian government's efforts have been specially focusing on just giving information to the people using these apps, means my gov, etc., all these apps, rather than doing something revolutionary like voting, etc., the government is using this technology like my gov, etc., just to give information. The government also gives out information about natural disaster. For example, people who are living in the coastal areas, they do get warning messages about, let's say, if there's a tsunami that is expected, if there's a cyclone that is expected, the government does send these warning messages. But our e-governance is mainly focused on giving information to the people through the apps rather than something else. Then check on corruption, improvement in corruption or improvement transparency have been more incidental than intentional. What do you mean by this? It means to say that yes, after e-governance initiatives, corruption has come down, transparency may have increased, but that is not something that the government has intentionally done. The government has not intentionally, by design, focused on reducing corruption. It has happened automatically because of technology coming in. It is not because the government wanted specifically to reduce corruption. E-governance is seen as a panacea, means solution. E-governance is seen as a solution to all the government and problems, which is not correct. Means we are still suffering from a lot of problems, and we cannot assume that just by using e-governance or technology, all those problems will be resolved. If, for example, we have a problem of bad environment, if we have a problem of poverty, if we have these kind of problems of food insecurity, assuming that e-governance is the solution for every single thing is not true. For some things, you require a human touch. Not everything can be done with technology. Again, imagine an old man or an old woman, retired, waiting for his or her pension. He has an app on the phone, the government app. He has to do something on the app in order to get the pension. Let's say on the app is asking for the OTP, and this old lady or old man does not know how to input the OTP. What will he do? Eventually he would need someone to be present there. He would need someone with a human touch to teach, okay, this is how it is done. And that is a problem here. E-governance cannot be the solution to each and everything. There are still some issues, there are still some limitations that cannot be resolved with e-governance, and that is why the challenges still remain. Before we talk about Digital India, give me a couple of minutes. Let me fill up my water bottle. I'll be back in a couple of minutes and then we'll resume from Digital India. Don't go anywhere. Okay. One of the other things that the government talks about quite a lot is Digital India. You keep on hearing the government about Digital India, that the government wants to push. Whenever government wants to highlight one of its achievements that they have achieved, they keep on talking about how they have tried to push the idea of Digital India. Now, all of you would have at least heard about what Digital India is. I'm not saying you have read in detail, but at least all of you would have heard the word Digital India specifically. Now, what we would have not seen is what are the pillars of Digital India, means what exactly are the components of Digital India. We know what Digital India is, but what are the components? So basically, the government of India has these 9 components of Digital India. Some of these you can just read and understand. For example, universal access to phones. Everyone knows what does it mean. It means everyone should have a mobile phone. Some of these you can understand. For example, electronic manufacturing, net zero imports, so that we are self-dependent on electronics. Some of these you might not be able to understand. So let's discuss these. Broadband highways. Now, what do you mean by broadband highways? Basically, what it means is broadband to be available everywhere in rural, urban, everywhere. Basically, all the areas should have broadband connectivity. So, basically, broadband across the country. Broadband across India, rural India, urban India, all of these should have broadband connectivity. For this, what is it that the government is doing? Government, for example, has the National BharatNet mission, under which in the BharatNet mission, as you know, the government is trying to connect all the villages in India to high-speed broadband. That is also part of broadband highways. The government is trying to put optical fiber network across the entire country so that all the panchayats, all the villages are connected through it. So the idea is, if not in the household, every village, at least in the panchayat office, should have a proper high-speed internet. So at least in the panchayat office, if someone wants to come and avail some services, they should have access to broadband services at least in the panchayat areas. Next, public internet access program. Now, what do you mean by public internet access program? Again, it means that, as I told you, rather than having personal connection, there should be common service centers. There should be common service centers. For example, let's assume that someone is living in a village and that person has to pay a bill online. Now, that person does not have an internet on his own. So, how does he pay the bill online? In every village, there should be one common service center. It can be in the panchayat itself or separately, where there will be a public computer kept, means a computer kept for public use, and there will be an operator who will help you. So you can go there, you can take the services so that they will be able to help you out. So the government focuses on post offices, panchayats, etc. So in every village, in the post office, in the panchayat, there will be a computer kept which will have an operator, which will have an internet connection, and you can use that computer, you can use its services to make sure that you can avail whatever online services that you require. That is called the Public Internet Service Program. For a very long time, the ITC company was running this project. The big company ITC was running this project. They had many of these centers across the entire country in many villages. Then we have information for all. Now, when you say information for all, what do you mean to say basically is apps such as MyGov, etc., that allow people to engage with the government. Information for all means people should get information about the government initiatives, government schemes, etc. Whatever the government is trying to launch, all of that should be something that should be open to public. Then we have the early harvest program. Now, early harvest program includes a lot of things. First, making sure that kids at a small age itself have proper exposure to technology. So, for example, from schools, etc., itself, you should be able to you should be able to get your hands on technology. And it's not just about that. Government offices should have biometric available. Universities should have their own Wi-Fi. All these are early harvest programs. So from the grassroots level, the government wants to provide this technology to everyone. Universal access to phone, as the name suggests, everyone should have a mobile phone with them. IT for jobs means the government has set a target that they want to train at least 1 crore people. The government wants to train 1 crore individuals from small towns and villages for IT jobs. The government wants to ensure at least 1 crore individuals from villages and small towns are given proper training in IT so that they're eligible for IT jobs. This is again something that the government wanted to achieve in 5 years. The 5 year target was not met, but the government is trying to do that. The government is trying to make sure that as many people can get jobs in IT as, and that would be much better. Then we have e-Kranti, electronic service, electronic delivery of services, the government services to be offered online. That is connected to the farmers online if the government wants to send a message to the farmers, healthcare facilities, online consultation, filing a case online. As many services of the government as possible should be given online. Then reforming governance through technology, that is e-governance. Again, e-governance means that the government, let's say, offering you Aadhaar services online, bill payment should be done online with government apps. UPI is a prime example of this. UPI, as you know, is a government beginning, is a government initiative, one of the biggest achievements of the government right now. The UPI initiative, all of that should be done online. And then in the end, net zero import of electronics. That is, we should be self-sufficient in electronics. We should be ensure, or we should be able to be manufacture whatever electronics that we require by ourselves, rather than dependent on China, dependent on something else. E-Kranti, I'll just repeat quickly. E-Kranti basically means government services being offered online. Let's say healthcare facilities, you can consult a doctor online. E-education, the government is running a lot of online programs free of cost. These are called MOOC, massive online open courses, where you can learn things online. You can download NCRT books online. You can watch free lectures of NCRT online. Apart from that, the government also allows you to file cases online. All that is a part of e-Kranti. That is e-Kranti. Early harvest program, as I told you, making sure that children from a very young age get access to technology from schools itself. In the syllabus, the children should be exposed to technology, how to use mobile phones, laptops, etc. Not just this, use of technology in education institutions, universities, etc. Use of technology in offices also for biometric, for your attendance. How do you get, when you go to an office, how do you mark that you are present? Either you sign on a register, but that can be duplicated. So now you are biometric with your fingerprint. It will be detected whether you are in the office or not. Guys, if you ask me to repeat one by one everything, then there's no point of me telling you this, right? If everyone says now repeat this, now repeat that, I think you need to be much more attentive, because if I start repeating everything, then we'll just keep repeating it, right? So I think you need to be much more attentive rather than me repeating every single thing. Net zero target means, I'm not sure what is the confusion in net zero. Net zero means if we are importing 100 rupees of stuff, we should also export at least 100 rupees of stuff. That is net zero. If you are importing 1 crore, then you should also export at least 1 crore. Priyanshu, IT for jobs means training of youth to get jobs in IT. The government has a plan to train at least 1 crore individuals in small towns and villages in the next 5 years to make them eligible to get jobs in IT, coding, etc. All these are pillars of digital India. Has the government been able to achieve all of them? Not really. It's an ongoing process. That the training of youth has not happened properly. We have not achieved net zero target of import of electronics. Yes, we are increasing the access, the availability of broadband across the country. It's a continuous goal, but we do not really see a lot of these targets having been achieved already. There are multiple examples of government initiatives in terms of how exactly would the government provide these services, or how the government has provided these services from time to time. Now, again, these are a few examples. You would have seen many more examples as compared to these, but in quote in the answers. My GOV app, if you have not used it, I would suggest you either download the app or visit the website. It's a government website that tells you about the government initiatives. They ask you for feedback about the government laws, there are quizzes, competitions, etc., that are held there. DigiLocker is a government app on which you can save your documents in the soft copy, your driving license, your insurance, your 10, 12 mark sheet, etc. All of that can be used or can be in DigiLocker. It's a kind of a Google Drive only, where all your important documents can be saved. If let's say you are driving a car or a bike and police wants to see your license, you can show license in DigiLocker, the copy of the license, that should be good enough. Then we have e-hospital. For example, you can go ahead and book your government hospital appointment online. Your records also will be kept here. For example, right now, when you visit one doctor, then you visit the other doctor, the second doctor wants to see all your earlier reports. So you have to carry that big bag to the hospital to a doctor to show all your old reports. All that should be stored online. That is e-hospital. Then we have Jeevan Praman. Jeevan Praman is especially for pensioners, those who have to take pension or those who are given pensions. They have to prove that they are alive, because the government wants to ensure that you are alive, only then the pensions will be given to you. Now, in a lot of government offices, there is this corruption or there is this issue that the government officers refuse to believe that you're alive. They will say that no, 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 you are dead. We have gotten a death certificate for you. With Aadhaar, with biometric identification, you can prove that I am alive and you can keep receiving your pension. Now, again, these are a few examples. There are many, many, many other examples that you can quote. Again, I'm telling you, in governance, your answers will not be complete unless you give examples. So make sure that you give examples in your answers. This is how my GOV website looks like. There's an app also, there's a website of MyGov. As you can see, there is discussion, there is blog, there is quiz, etc. that happens here. You can go ahead and participate. All these are again option that you see on MyGov website. I'm not saying that you should always use it, but see, the best way to remember all these things or remember these options or give examples is to use it by yourself. It will hardly take 5 to 10 minutes. Like when we were studying about RTI, I told you to try and file an RTI online, because only when you file an RTI online will you actually get to know the exact real process of doing it. So it will be much easier for you to write and make them or make people understand what is RTI. Similarly, here as well, MyGov or DigiLocker, unless you use it, you will not be able to understand exactly what they are. So I would suggest you to use them. Download these apps, MyGov, DigiLocker, all these are easy to download apps and you can use them as well. One example that I wanted to give you is if you look at the countries that have been using technology or countries that have adopted e governance, the one country whose name comes at the very top is Estonia. Estonia is a very small country in Eastern Europe. Estonia is said to be the 100% digital nation. Basically, almost all the government services are provided online. If you look at Estonia, just like we have an Aadhaar card, they have a population ID card. 98% people in the country have the population ID card. 99% government services are provided online. 95% tax declarations are done online. 99% banking is done online. Entire country has a broadband connection. Now, it's an example which many countries are trying to replicate. They even have their own digital currency as well. Now, if you look at Estonia, the problem that we have in India, for example, whenever you see any example that this country is doing it, that country is doing this, the problem that we face in replicating the same in India is that in India, the scale of population is so huge that you can't really replicate that. So Estonia's population is about 13.5 lakh, only 13.5 lakh. 13.5 lakh are the number of people that you will actually see in our shopping malls on weekends. If you look at big cities such as Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, if you look at all the shopping malls, people on the weekends, this will be the population. So again, comparing a country with 13 and a half lakh people to a country that has over 140 crore people is not fair. And that actually is an issue, that you can see examples all around the world of countries doing this or countries adopting some technology, but you can't really replicate that in India. The only country of India's scale when it comes to population is China, but China's government system is so different again as compared to India that you can't really compare it. And that is why solutions that might have worked somewhere else do not necessarily mean that they will work for India as well. And that is why I'm telling you that when you write these kind of things in the answer, in the UPSC paper, they will ask you about solutions, they will ask you about suggestions. So when you write about some solutions or some suggestions for India, do keep that in mind. Is it possible or practical to do this in India? Only if it is possible or practical, only then go ahead and write that answer or speak in the interview. Don't just write or speak randomly. Only when these things are possible to be adopted, only then talk about them, otherwise do not. On that note, let's also see what are the kind of questions that we see in e-governance. Now, as I told you, e-governance is a very common topic. Every second, third year, you will see a question from e-governance. Like in 2020, this was a question from e-governance. The emergence of fourth industrial revolution or digital revolution has initiated e-governance as an integral part of government discuss. It's a question asked in 2020. It's a 150 word answer. Now, again, if you see, and I'll show you some other questions as well. If you see questions of e-governance, almost all the questions are similar only. Questions on e-governance will either be on challenges in e-governance, they will either be about about the good part about e-governance or the bad part about e-governance. These are the two types of questions that you have, and in all of these you would have to quote examples. You have to quote examples of e-governance, of new apps that the government has introduced, new kind of portals that the government has introduced. All these will be the same. So what I want you to do is take a break. In the break, try and see what answer can be written. If possible, write a complete answer. If not possible, at least think about what the answer has to be. We'll come back at 8:15 to discuss this. Thank you. Hi everyone. So before the break, we had this question, and I said that if it would be great if you try and write an answer to this. The question is the emergence of fourth industrial revolution or the digital revolution has initiated e-governance as an integral part of government. Discuss. Now, usually when you have these kind of questions where the keyword here is discuss, comment, elaborate, in these kind of questions they are not asking you something straightforward, means they are not specifically asking you to tell us this. For example, in some questions they will ask you straightforward that what are the advantages of this, what are the disadvantages of this, what is the membership, or what is there that you have to write. So there are some questions that are very specifically straightforward, pointedly asked to you. However, in these kind of questions where the keyword is discuss, comment, elaborate, they are not asking you something straightforward or directly. Rather, what they are doing here is they are trying to just give a statement and then ask you to elaborate on that. So, what do you have to do in these cases? In these cases, you will have to expand on the statement given. Whatever is given, you don't have to go contrary to that. If the keyword is just discuss, comment, elaborate, means you don't have to go contrary to whatever the statement is. Whatever the statement is, try to make sure that you just expand on that. On the other hand, as this one is saying, if the question is critically analyze, when they're asking you to critically analyze, that means that then you would have to go both pros and cons or give both sides. Think of it in that manner. When you see a movie critic does what? A movie critic tells you what is, let's say, league, or what is good and what is bad in the movies, both of these. That is why when you say critically analyze, that means analyze the statement in such a way where you talk about the good parts also and the bad parts also. So critically analyze, wherever you will see the word critical, that means try and give both sides of the argument. When the word is discuss, comment, elaborate, means just expand on what the question is already telling you. So in the intro, I'm giving you three options and I'm giving you the answer as well here. In the intro, we can write either of the three. The intro, as I told you earlier as well, the best part to write an intro, the best way to write an intro is either a fact or a definition. So either write a fact or write a definition in the introduction. Here we are writing a definition of the fourth industrial revolution. Now in the question you have to pick the keyword and on that keyword write its definition. So the keyword is a fourth industrial revolution. So we'll try and define that. Now there are different ways in which you can do that. See, it's not a school exam or it's not an exam where you have to exactly remember each and every question and then write that. It is an exam where you'll have to write most of the things from your own mind. And that is why the definition doesn't have to be exactly the same. There can be different definitions, whatever you understand from the fourth industrial revolution, try and write that definition. So we'll write a definition of fourth industrial revolution or any of these you can go ahead with. Then the main body. Now in the main body, we'll talk about the advantages that exist of e-governance. All these are the advantages that we have. Now I am giving you important pointers here that you can actually write. When you write words such as transparency, try and give examples as well. Try and give examples. For example, with transparency you can say online mechanism of filing RTI, better policy measures, easier access to services, for example, through government apps such as DigiYatri, etc. All of these can be written and try and elaborate them at least in one or two lines. Try and elaborate in at least one line. Now, please understand this. So, for example, I see some questions or people are writing an answer while this where they say transparency dash e-governance will make the government more transparent. That is useless. Don't write like this. Again, I'm repeating. I have seen people writing transparency dash e-governance makes the government more transparent. That is of no use. You are just wasting words. Write something which is important. Write something which is relevant. You're just expanding one word into a line. I don't mean that. When I say elaborate, that means transparency dash give an example of how exactly does it make things more transparent. So don't write a line just for the sake of writing it. Write something that adds a bit of value. In the main body, you can also write about the constants, as we had discussed earlier, the constants of e-governance. You don't have to remember all of these pointers sitting in the examination hall. Four, five, three, how many points you remember? Try and answer those. Try and see if you can write those constants. What are the issues in e-governance? Then some other examples that you can quote. Again, I'm giving you examples to quote separately, but I would advise you to quote these answers in the main body itself. A lot of people make this mistake that they will write the entire answer. In the conclusion, they will just give a few examples because someone told them examples should be given. That is not the way. Examples have to be a part of the main body itself. So make sure that in the main body itself you give the examples. BharatNet, as I told you, is the government's broadband initiative to connect the entire country with broadband. Meghraj is government's cloud service basically. Just like we have Google Drive, you can store data online. That is a cloud service. DigiLocker, where you can save your documents. The COVID app, MyGov app. MCA 21 is for the companies, the corporates. The companies have their account here, applying for license, paying fees, paying taxes. All of that can be done through the MCA 21 portal. There are other examples also that you can quote depending on whatever you remember. This is not the only example. Try and see what examples can you quote, and then you can conclude this by giving a balanced statement here that India has the potential to leapfrog our development journey with the use of the fourth industrial revolution. Something like this can be the way in which you can try and conclude this. Again, the answer that I'm giving you, it's not the only answer that can be written, or it's not the only way in which you can write the answer. It depends entirely upon you. If you have some other ideas, if you want to include something else, go ahead to do that as well. There's no issue with that also. Similarly, there's one more question asked in 2019. The question that we just discussed was 2020. In 2019, also similar question is asked. This is more straightforward. The question is implementation of information and communication technology based projects suffers in terms of certain vital factors. Identify the factors and suggest measures for effective implementation. So this one is much more straightforward. They are straight away asking you the problems in e-governance, and then they're asking you the solution part. So this is pretty straightforward, simple question. The content is almost the same. Whatever content that we wrote in the last answer, because again, the content for e-governance questions usually remains the same. Problem, solution, problem, solution. So here also, they're trying to talk about what are the problems that the government faces while implementing these projects and what are the solutions. So again, we'll first try and define what is ICT. It is a part of good governance and enhances accessibility by bridging the gap in governance. So something like this can be the intro. Now in the main body, easy, feel first at the problems. The problem part we have discussed earlier as well. All these are the problems. Here, I would advise you not to write the cost of data. The reason being that now, with Geo coming in and all the other companies reducing their prices, India now has one of the cheapest data or broadband rates in the entire world. So, broadband or data is pretty cheap in India. And Mr. Pratish, if you can stop copy pasting, I would really appreciate it. Please do not spam the chat. Don't copy paste time and time again. So, the cost of data is not really a factor now. It has become pretty low. India has one of the lowest cost of data in the entire world. Other problems can be written here. The solution part, it's again easy to write. See, if you know the problems, if you just write opposite to it, it becomes a solution part. So if these are the problems, if you just write opposite to them, it becomes the answer. For example, the answer here, let's say if the problem here is lack of infrastructure, the answer here will be creating suitable infrastructure. If the question is, or if the problem is digital illiteracy, then the answer obviously becomes digital literacy. So if you know the problems, then automatically the solution will just have to be the opposite of it. Try and make sure that you understand that part. So if you know the problem, writing solutions is not that difficult. Then we'll conclude this by saying how we have to have a balanced approach, how we have to understand that if we have to take benefits of ICT, we must address the issues that exist with it so that we can improve our efficiency, transparency. Something like this can be the conclusion. Again, these are not the only way in which answers can be written. This is something that is for you to take a clue from. Most of the questions of e-governance are asked in the same kind of a manner. There is nothing different. You just have to understand it and have to start writing. Make sure that you are writing in simple, lucid language. No one expects you to use a very flowery vocabulary all of a sudden. Also, please understand this. See, many people right now have this issue or they come up with this problem that, sir, my handwriting is not good. See, the point is, if over 20 years of your life have passed and you have not changed your handwriting, you can't change your handwriting now. It's as simple as that. So, if your problem is your handwriting is not good, there is no solution to that right now. But when you say that your handwriting is not good, what you can say is try and see if you can make it slightly more readable. Rather, for example, if you write, let's say, very closely, try and give some gap between the words. If you think the writing is not good, try and use these two three things. First, give gap between the words, make it easier for someone who is reading it. Secondly, try and make sure that you do not cut a lot. The more you cut, the more words that you are actually cutting, that makes it very bad for the examiner to read. So some of the things that you have to understand here is try and make sure that you are not cutting a lot, you are not changing your answers time and time again. And if you're not confident about your answer writing or about your handwriting as such, try and make sure you give a bit more gap in between the words. When you change the paragraph, also leave some space so that it becomes easily readable. Here are a few questions for your practice. This is again a previous year question that has been asked. You can try and write this answer. Performance of welfare schemes that are implemented for vulnerable sections is not so effective due to absence in their awareness and involvement, active involvement in all the stages. Discuss. So there are some questions, not from e-governance specifically. There are some practice questions from previous year that you can try and answer here as well. Now, the last part about this particular class is reforms in governance. Now, there are some areas in which the government of India has tried to carry out some reforms, and these are asked also in the paper. Now, the reforms that we will be discussing, which the government has tried to carry out, is in three areas. We will be discussing number one, reforms in prison system in India. There's a lot of talk about the prison system in India, the prison reforms. Second, we'll talk about healthcare. And third, we'll talk about education. These are the three areas in which you will see a lot of news, a lot of questions also being asked. These are the three areas where the government has tried to bring in reforms of different types. Let's start with the first one, that is the prison reforms in India. Now, prison system in India needs a lot of improvement. There are many issues related to it: overcrowding of the prisons, violence in the prison, not enough basic facilities in the prison, the sanitation facilities are not that great. All of these are issues that remain within the prison system in India. The government has tried to reform it. The one thing that we have to understand is what is the intention or the logic behind making a prison. Is a prison for punitive action or is it for corrective action? Please understand the difference between the punitive means to punish someone for what they did. Punishing someone for what they did is punitive, or taking revenge from them is punitive. That you did this, now we will do this to you. That is punitive or revenge. Corrective means trying to improve the person as a whole, trying to understand why the person committed a crime, and then trying to improve that person as much as possible. That is called corrective. So earlier, at the time of the British specifically, when the prisons were introduced, at the time of the British, they were more punitive in nature, means it was more about taking revenge from the people. Now, the prison system in India aims at reforming them, aims at correcting them. That is why, for example, if you, I wanted to say if you go to Tihar jail, but no, don't go to Tihar jail. If you read about Tihar jail, you will see the prisoners in Tihar jail, for example, are given training on a lot of skills. They are given training of how to make furniture. They are given training on how to, let's say, use different types of skill, tailoring machines, etc., are given to them so that later on when they go out, they are able to assimilate with others in the society. These are some of the things that have been done in India. Now, there are multiple issues related to prisons. First big issue, huge number of pending cases. Now, the problem with pending cases is there are so many people in the prisons in India who are not proven guilty. In fact, over two-thirds of the prison population in India, over two-thirds, 67.2% are under trials. Under trial means on whom the case is still ongoing. The case has not been proven. Now, this is very, very, very wrong because the prison is supposed to be for criminals on whom the case has already been proven. But in India's case, over two-thirds of prisoners are those on whom the case has not even been proven. That is a big problem. Then, a lot of laws are obsolete. A lot of laws are still carrying on from the time of the British. The government has not changed them properly, which is why the prisons are overflowing right now with a lot of those cases which should have been resolved much, much, much easier, much simply, or much in a much more simple manner because the cases were not that serious. Inhumane behavior in the prison. See, the common population, the common people don't really care about the prison. Understand this. If today I ask you to make a list of 10 biggest problems in India, or not even 10, even if I ask you to make a list of 20 biggest problems in India, I can assure you, no, none of you out of this 20 will write jail problem. You will all write about pollution, corruption, poverty, job, etc., etc. No one will write that the prisoners are not treated properly. For a common man who is outside the prison, what is happening inside the prison does not concern us, right? We are not concerned what is happening inside the prison. Even the first 15, 20 biggest problems that we can think of, none of that would be related to the prison. That is why even when people in the prison they don't get the best behavior, there is nothing that happens because no one is raising voices for them outside. There is overcrowding. In 2020, it was reported in Tihar jail the capacity of 7,000 people had over 15,000 prisoners. Means in a jail cell or in a room which is supposed to have two people, four people were being kept. That automatically leads to violence. When you see so many cases of violence, that is also due to overcrowding, where many more people are stuffed in as compared to what is the capacity. Even the staff is not enough. In 2020, in the central jail in Chennai, there was only one guard for every 100 prisoners. For every 100 prisoners, there is only one guard in Chennai central jail. Means if the prisoners really want and they can together group, they can overpower the guard and they can create a lot of damage. All these are issues that remain in prisons throughout the country. Now, if you see here, the occupancy rate in the prisons have increased considerably and the number of prisoners are much, much, much higher. This is the prison capacity. So in total, the prison capacity in India is 4 lakh 20,000 plus, or 4 lakh 30,000 lump sum. And the number of prisoners are over 5.5 lakh. So number of prisoners that we have, and this is 2021 data, that is a later released by the government. The number of prisoners that we have is much, much, much higher than number of prisoners that can be accommodated in the prison, and that is why the issues still remain. Now, about the prisons in India, multiple international conventions have been signed for the prisoners. Issue of prisoners and treatment given to them is an international issue. Many countries have come together to sign many agreements. For example, Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948 talked about the prisoners. No one should be arrested arbitrarily. Everyone is innocent until proven guilty. We also have International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, Declaration on Protection from Torture. All these are international agreements specifically for the prisoners. India is not really a party to it because these are not binding as such. None of these are binding in nature, but these are systems which have been put into place so that prisoners and the treatment given to them improves all across the world. What are reforms in India? The Supreme Court a few years back appointed a Justice Amitav Roy committee, retired Supreme Court judge, to recommend how to improve the position of prisons in India. They recommended very generic things: have speedy trials, have at least one lawyer for every 30 prisoners, have special fast track courts, and have a concept of plea bargaining. Now, what is plea bargaining? This is a concept seen in the US, UK, but not in India. You might have seen this in movies. Let me explain what is plea bargaining. Let's assume there's a person on whom the police has arrested him. The charges are that you have committed a crime. Okay. Now, if the person says, no, I have not committed the crime, what will happen? The police will still arrest you. The case will go on in the court. It might take 5, 7, 10 years to decide the case. It will waste your time. It will waste your money. It will waste everyone's resources. So what the police tells the person is, police says, accept the crime. If you accept the crime, we will give you only 1 or 2 years of punishment. You can start the punishment today itself. After 2 years, you are done. You are free. What will happen? You will save a lot of time. You will save a lot of money. You don't have to pay to the lawyer. So accept your crime. If you accept your crime, we will try and make sure you get lesser punishment. That is called plea bargaining. That you bargain with the police, that by saying that, okay, I will accept my crime, now give me lesser punishment, I'm saving your time, I'm saving your money. It happens in the US, it happens in UK, it does not happen in India. In India, we do not have this concept of plea bargaining, and this is a suggestion that this should be introduced, that if someone is willing to accept their crime, the system should allow them lesser punishment so that they can go ahead and do not waste the time of the justice system. There are some data points that tell you the situation of prisons in India. Look at this. In Chhattisgarh, there are 234 people in the prison as compared to every 100 occupancy rate. In place of 100, 234 people are locked up. In Delhi, 2 to 7. On an average, the capacity of Indian prisons is 114%. So, on an average, if you see, for 100 people whose space is in the prison, 114 people are kept in the prison. It is also because of the low number of lawyers, not having legal aid. See, someone who is rich, who can afford to hire the best of lawyers, they would not have a problem in getting a bail. Getting a bail or not being able to come out of the jail, this is a problem that people without any resources face. And that is where the responsibility is also with the system, with the government, to provide enough lawyers and lawyers who are actually willing to work for them. This was the prison sector and its reforms. Next sector, which requires reforms, and the government has been carrying out reforms, is the healthcare sector. You get a lot of questions asked on healthcare, specifically about the reforms in healthcare sector in India. We always knew that the healthcare sector in India is not that great. After COVID 19, the problems became even bigger. Please understand this: healthcare, education, whatever problems that we will discuss, none of these problems exist for rich people. Healthcare issues or education issues or education sector in India is not a problem for rich, wealthy people. Why? Because if you have the money, you can afford the best of facilities. If you have the money, you can go anywhere in the world and get your checkup done or get yourself treated. If you have the money in the world, you go to any school or college around the entire world and take admission there. So the problems that we will discuss in healthcare and education, it does not apply to everyone. It applies to those who are dependent on the government facilities. Please remember that. It does not uh, apply to those who are able to afford private healthcare or private education. Private healthcare in India is very good. Private healthcare in India is good, so good that patients come in from other countries for to India in the name of medical tourism. But it is those who are dependent on the government for these facilities that face issues. So please do remember that. Now there are a lot of issues in healthcare in India. All of you are aware of that. Medical infrastructure is not up to the mark. There are just not enough hospital beds or facilities in the government hospital specifically. Again, if you can afford it, if you go to private sector, these problems don't apply to you. These problems only apply to those people who are not able to afford their own health care. Lack of standard of quality care, many non-communicable diseases. See, it is human nature that we fear communicable diseases much more than non-communicable diseases. It's human nature. Non-communicable diseases, for example, mean diabetes, blood pressure. These are non-communicable diseases. Obesity. These are non-communicable diseases, mean they don't spread from one person to the other person. They kill so many people in India, but still we focus much more on communicable diseases. COVID 19 was a communicable disease, so people got much more scared. But the reality is, if you look at all these other non communicable diseases, their health burden is very, very, very high. Our mental health care facilities are not up to the mark, and also we just don't have of public health in India. We need at least 20 lakh doctors by 2030. WHO recommend, now look at this data. WHO says that ideally we should have one doctor over every 1000 people. So if you look at, let's say, India's ratio, if India's population is, let's assume, 140 crore. If India's population is 140 crore, then how many doctors you require as per this ratio? Calculate this. If you see 140 crore, see this. Divide this by 1000. See, these are the number of doctors that we require in India ideally. Ideally speaking, we should have these many doctors in India, that is at least 14 lakh doctors in India. But right now, the ratio that we have is 1 is to 11,000. So we need many, many, many more doctors in India. Again, I'm repeatedly telling you, these problems don't apply to those who can afford private healthcare. If you can afford private healthcare, if you can afford to pay the money, you can go anywhere in the world. The entire world is open to you. These problems apply to those who cannot afford it. Other big problem in India in healthcare sector is something called out of pocket expenditure. In India, you have seen this in your child, in your home also. In India, people just don't like going to a doctor. You can look at your own house. Your parents might have a fever, might have a cough infection. They will not go to doctor. You avoid going to doctor at every single cost. You try and go to doctor only when it is absolutely necessary. Only then we go to a doctor. Usually, we all have that medicine box in our home, that transparent white box where we have kept unused medicines. We pop up the medicines ourselves and we think that is the right way forward. We don't go to a doctor unless it's absolutely necessary. One of the reasons is in India, not many people have medical insurance. That is a big problem. Not many people have medical insurance. Now, the situation has improved after Ayushman Bharat Yojana and other schemes, but the reality is still a lot of people don't have medical insurance. When you don't have medical insurance, the problem is you have to pay from your own pocket, and that becomes a big problem. Out of pocket expenditure is a huge expenditure that you have to pay, and that becomes a problem. The higher the out of pocket expenditure, the more are the chances people will not go to the doctor, because you don't go to doctor because you know that it is extremely expensive. You have to pay from your own pocket. In India, we still have to improve the number of people who have insurance. The government has made efforts towards it with the Ayushman Bharat Yojana, etc. It has worked well, but we still have a lot of out of pocket expenditure, which discourages the people from visiting the hospitals. Here are certain suggestions. Biggest suggestion: improve spending, improve health infrastructure. Currently, 2.1% of the GDP goes into healthcare services. It has to increase and go much higher. Provide better mental health care facilities, have health inequalities addressed. We do have great hospitals like AIMS, etc., which can treat most of the diseases. But if you go to AIMS, there is such a long waiting that it doesn't make sense. For example, if you have to go and have an operation, you go to AIMS, they will tell you to come after 4 months or 5 months, because there is such a long waiting period in the government hospitals. And that is why people have no option but to opt for private service or not take any treatment at all. Strengthen governance of healthcare bodies. We saw what happened with the NEET examination. When you make doctors in your country through leaked paper system, what else do you expect in the country? Just think about that. If the doctors in your country are passing the examination because of a leaked paper, you are obviously not in a very good situation. Also, give tax benefits to those who are actually investing in healthcare. See, setting up a hospital or setting up healthcare facilities is expensive. Hospitals require a lot of expenditure, a lot of infrastructure. All of that will only be possible if the government provides tax benefits. For example, if someone is setting up the hospital, the government should tell them that, okay, we will not take taxes from you for some time, or for some time we will take lower taxes from you, so that you can recover whatever you have spent. That is something that the government should look ahead, and that is a suggestion, so that the government can leave more money in the hands of healthcare infrastructure facilities, so that they can improve on their offerings. From this part of healthcare system, you can try and write this answer. It's a practice question. It will be given in the PPT that is given to you. The last one, the last area rather of reforms that can be asked in the paper is the education sector. Just like the healthcare, in education sector also, the problems exist for those who can't afford to go to private facilities. If you can afford to go to private facilities, then the entire world is open to you. Then you don't have a problem. The problem occurs for those who are dependent on the government facilities, specifically for education as well. Now, a few years back, as you know, the government introduced the National Education Policy. It was the third such policy after 1968 and 1986. Please understand, policies are not binding. Just because a national education policy has come out does not mean whatever is written in the policy will be implemented. For it to be implemented, a new law has to be passed, the government has to make rules about it. So, not everything that the national education policy says will be done. National education policy focuses on bringing the children back to school, those who dropped out during the COVID-19 crisis. It focuses on vocational training from class 6th onwards. Vocational training means basically using skills by hands. For example, If you look at countries such as Sweden, Iceland, Norway, their schooling system is considered to be the best in the world. Why? Because children learn by doing. You will see small children building furniture. A child knows that the seat where the child is sitting on, how the seat is made, how the table is made, how do you make certain stuff, how do you grow a plant, how do you take care of a plant. All these are vocational trainings that are not done in our school. That is what the new educational policy suggests, that we need to have vocational training. We should focus much more on learning outcomes rather than just giving marks in the end. The focus has to be put much more on ensuring that there's a skill based development that goes into our school system. Again, national education policy or any such policy, remember, is never binding. It is not binding. These are just suggestions. The government may or may not accept them. These are the issues that we have within the education sector in India. First, inadequate infrastructure. Again, so many government schools don't have enough facilities. They don't even have proper facilities for the students to sit, no proper facility for the teacher to teach. L- Forget about a computer lab, forget about a chemistry or physics lab or a bio lab. Even the most basic amenities are missing. There are there are no separate toilets for girls in most of the schools, and that becomes a problem. And that's why you will see many more girl children dropping out of school as compared to boys. 48%, as I said, schools lack proper infrastructure. 23% don't even have electricity. 22% don't have ramps for physically disabled. Even washroom facilities are missing in most of these government schools. There's a high dropout rate. See, national education policy till class 8th allows you to have free schooling. As I said, okay, there's someone who's asking when is the national education policy implemented. As I told you, there is no implementation date of the policy. When the policy comes in, it depends on the government which pointers on the policy do they want to implement. So it's a continuous process. There is no one date that the government says from tomorrow the policy will be implemented. That is not how it happens. What the government does is government tries to take up certain pointers from that, whichever they think is suitable, and then the government will try and implement those. So it's not that the entire policy will be implemented. We also face a problem of brain drain. Brain drain means a lot of people moving out of India after their education for better opportunities. We feel proud that CEO of Google, Microsoft, all these are Indian origin people. But the sad part is, why are they moving out of India? Why are they not staying in India and building something in India? That's a problem with brain drain. We still have a lot of illiterate people. Literacy rate has improved. It's not that it has not improved, but we still have about a quarter of our population that is still illiterate. And the problem is, even those who are literate, their level of education is not that great. Even those who are literate don't really have the kind of skills that are required to get jobs. Even after, for example, courses such as engineering, companies hire engineers in large numbers. Then the companies have to train the engineers first and then get them to a job. The companies say that the colleges have not even taught them enough for us to give them a proper ready made job, and that again remains a big issue. There's lack of technical training and vocational education in most of the good schools or the good colleges that have opened up. Education has become unaffordable. Even the government institutes, look at IIMs. IIMs are government institutes for MBAs, but even they cost so much money now. MBAs in IIMs can cost upward of 30 lakh rupees now, even though they're government institutes, and government institutes supposedly are supposed to be not that expensive. Then there's issue of gender inequality. Every parameter in India, every parameter, you will see the girls lagging in terms of the education being provided to them. There is a issue within the family. Many families, if they have a choice, they choose to send only boys to the school for longer duration rather than girls. That mindset also has to change. UNICEF says that poverty and local culture practices play a major role in not enough females, not enough girls going to school in India. That also remains a big problem. These are the suggestions that we have for education system. Implement the national education policy of how it usually should be. For example, the 10 plus 2 system should be changed to 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4 system. Any idea what exactly is this? Any idea what exactly is this system that we are talking about? 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4 education system. So basically, the idea is first 5 years of your schooling, let's say until class second, will be the foundational stage. So for first 5 years, there will be just foundation that will be built. After that, the next 3 years are called preparatory stage. So basically, for first 5 years, no books should be used. No books should be used for the first 5 years. And then, so this is foundational. Next 3 years, preparatory. Next 3 years will be the stage of preparatory learning. Then next 3 years will be middle stage. The next 3 years are considered as the middle stage, and the last 4 years are considered as the secondary stage. So 9 to 12th class basically is a secondary stage. So we have to focus on this. This is a suggestion. This has been suggested in the national education policy as well. Focus on ethics and value education as well. There is a subject called moral science, but moral science classes are usually taken up by the maths teacher, by the science teacher, because their syllabus is lagging, so they have to cover it up. That should not happen. Ethics, value education should also be an integral part of our system, and the school education system and the college education system requires much more investment as compared to what we have right now. All these are suggestions, and if you have more, you can write more suggestions as well. This is a practice question that if you want, you can try and write an answer to from the education system issue. This brings me to the end of the class today, just right on time. We still have a few minutes for the SME to answer your questions, so you can keep on asking questions for the SME. He'll answer. Bhuvnesh, you can't improve your vocab automatically. You don't need to include any complex words. Whatever words you know already are good. At this point of life, I don't expect you to now start reading new words. Even if you read new words, you won't be able to use it because it will not come naturally to you. So focus on whatever you already know. Lakshmi, 200 words. All right, then. That's it for me. I'll meet you tomorrow. We will have the SME here to answer your question for the next few minutes. I'll see you for the next one tomorrow at 6 a.m. Bye bye. Jai Hind.